So Koen, welcome back. When we look at the FinOps program at Ahold Delhaize, let's start with what is in scope of the FinOps program?
That's a very wide question. First of all, we're at the Black Sea region, meaning that's already 5 countries. Mm-hmm. One of our goals has been set forward is that we will provide the FinOps as a service for those 5 countries. Make their invoice from, at this point in time, Azure, really visible and tangible, so that they know what they are going to consume. That's the first part. The second part of your question is, of course, today our focus is only on Azure. We have our main deployments, or the vast majority of our deployments, into the Azure cloud. But when we design, we always take in the back of our minds the multitude of the different flavors that exist. We know that currently we're looking for IaaS in Azure, but we are also preparing for the SaaS and PaaS in Azure. But we don't only talk about Azure, we also look at the Google Cloud platforms and other service providers, and how we can integrate them in a later state in this FinOps baseline, let's say. So that's in rough the scope in the 2-folded flavors that we see it. Mm-hmm.
And how did you structure the program?
Well, before going into the structure, let me take you on a small 2-minute story about our journey. Mm-hmm. So how we got together. So first of all, we have, as already mentioned, 4 years that we're busy with the cloud migration. Our company is evolving into a cloud organization. And at a certain point in time, okay, we're confronted with the costs, and what's next? I took now the position to start reading about what is FinOps, and I created a document where I first wrote down what are the challenges that I have, what do I know or see that we already have in place, showback, cross-charging, or what I don't have in place, and that's what I then called the challenges. What do we need to solve as problems, making people aware about these new cost models that are coming. And this we grouped in a document with also a kind of priority list. Out of there, we set together, and just to be correct, this is a story that started in September of last year, the creation of that document. I think during the month of October, we had contact with each other and we discussed about this document. And then end of October, 45Degrees came back with a proposition on how we would tackle it. Like already explained by Sam, we started with the discovery phase. Not research phase, we called it discovery phase. And there we identified the 15 capabilities that we see fit for our organization that we require. That goes indeed from cross-charging up to the level of the showback, which reports need to be created, into the tagging strategy that needs to be determined in order to find back the bits and pieces that come together to form a function. And last but not least, also the full finance integration of the process and procedures. Because we can do FinOps, but if our finance team is not on the same plate with us, not in the same bath with us, we will not change anything. We will not change the culture, and we will not be able to proactively manage the costs that come out of the cloud. Now, after we defined the 15 capabilities, we went to the next phase. As Sam explained, we identified a crawl, a walk, and a run phase for each one of them. And then at the end, we built a kind of roadmap around it. When do we try to tackle this capability or that capability? But also the link between the capabilities. If you don't have a tagging strategy in place, you will not be able to create a report. Or you will create a report without proper content in it. Or you will not be able to explain the content. So that's a bit the approach that we're taking at this point in time. Now, as mentioned, we started in September by creating the document. Some people say that I'm high demanding, but I am proud on what my team already has achieved, and that is by end of this quarter, we will be able to send out to our different country leads a report on their consumption of the first quarter of this year. And that's our next milestone, and that will be a challenging one with some pushback understandings and a lot of questions, but I'm really looking forward to this journey.
So you mentioned the finance people involved. What roles are involved in the broader FinOps program today at Ahold Delhaize?
Well, you have the literature, as I already explained, and one of the questions in the first part was that, okay, you have a FinOps lead, a practitioner, and the advisor. Well, we as an organization don't have it. So I just went spreading the word, discussing with people during coffees, and then I found different people that were interested in my story, that were also looking for, but what does this function or application now cost? And the first team that I have in mind, the first person that I have in my team is my IT finance person. Because that's the person that I currently work with my investment proposals, with my business cases. If there are projects that need to be defined, we sit together to build the full financial picture. And I explained to her, well, we're going to change fully the story on how we work. CapEx, OpEx, we're going to remove the CapEx part. No longer investments, but you will see an OpEx one. And she got interested into it. And she also quite quickly understood that the financial processes, as we know today, going from cash flow, P&L, budget, and forecasting, they are going to change. How? We cannot identify yet, but that we will have an impact, that's sure. That's my first person, very key in the story. Second person is my cloud foundation engineer. My cloud foundation engineer is the one that understands in depth the technology of the cloud. He knows what a VM is, but also what a resource is. He understands what a tag is, but is also able to modify that tag for you or build new tags. Because in the beginning, we didn't have a tagging strategy in our FinOps department, meaning that we were not able to single out the consumption of one application or one country. So we set forward a requirement within our crawl stage of the tagging strategy. We need to be able to determine the budget owner. And that foundation engineer, that cloud foundation engineer, made it happen. Were there consequences? Yes, but that's something else. So that's my second person. And the third one is one of my enterprise system engineers. Someone that is really not involved in the modern way of thinking in the cloud. It's someone with a background of P-series, AX, DB2, and Linux. But he is bringing a complete different view at the table, which is quite valuable. For him, it's just logic that you power off systems, or that you have shared components, or that you are able to mix and match different components to come to a resolution on an enterprise grade. He also has the reality in him that he's stating, well, it's good that you think about volatile workloads, but if I look at an enterprise grade system, it's not volatile. Some capabilities, functions, applications from our business are not cloud ready. We're able to put them in the IaaS. But in the IaaS, that's another way of working than in a SaaS and a PaaS. So that's my team today. Very proud again that we're able to report out after merely 4 months of work. And what the future will bring, well, I would say let's host this event again in 12 months and have that discussion.
Well, let's challenge you still a bit on that. So by the end of Q1, you would like to show the country leads like a first version of their costs. But on a higher level, what are your expected results?
Well, I once described it. For me, the Valhalla would be is that if I have a tool that is working with artificial intelligence, that is able to take those new services that pop up, or those new billing methods that come up, or new discounts that come up, and automatically puts it into my reporting and shows me if you engage on this service or if you engage on that type of service, you will have a gain of that much. And that I'm able to take that story towards my business and engage on optimization discussions. Optimization discussions up to the level of really re-engineering the platform behind it. So that would be the end game, in my opinion. Reality is going to be that we're able to really go into FinOps, that I'm able to have on a monthly basis discussions with my business, have a discussion about the cost versus value, making sure that we're able to report on it, but also guaranteeing to my legal department, guys, we're not doing weird things with the data and story in the cloud, because once new things pop up, it comes up to the radar with alertings. I'm able to guide my vendor management team or sourcing team. My dear team, I've seen an increase of that type of resources in the last months or a decrease. Go do with it in the negotiations. But also to my finance team that I'm able to tell, dear finance, this is how we see the evolution of the last 6 months, 12 months of the costs. This is how we predict it to be. And then with the input of our business, that needs to be able to state, well, we expect more workload there and less workload there, that we're able to build a semi-predictable cost for the cloud. So that would be, for me, the desired versus real.
It's not the Valhalla, but it's where you want to get.
Yes.
So, a last question. Based on your journey of the last months, based on the learnings that even started before the journey, obviously, because there was a phase before that, what would you recommend to our audience, which still needs to start climbing the mountain?
First of all, don't be scared about the mountain. Don't be scared about the vast majority of work that lies in front of you. Yes, we gave a lot of information, technical, non-technical, philosophical, up to the level that you really need to try to change the culture of your company with a lot of stakeholders. But what I do find very interesting with FinOps is that it is a modern workload. Modern workload that allows to work in very small pieces, in an agile way of working, in sprints, and even those small steps. Again, I come back to my example. After 4 months, I'm able to report out to my country leads their consumption in the cloud, that you're able to get those things very fast. In all honesty, it is a 24-month journey at this point in time, but those very small steps are crucial, and don't be scared of it. It's fun. On the other side, do expect a pushback. Do expect a lot of people not understanding the new language that cloud and cloud financials is bringing. In all honesty, we talk about enablements, subscriptions, landing zones, and all the other nice technical things, but they are not always quantifiable from a cost point of view. You'll need to learn that new language as well. For me, and now maybe you're going to tell me that I'm a dinosaur, I was formed as an engineer on the ZOS mainframe. And now I am talking about FinOps. So I've also tried to invent myself and understand this new world. It is just fun and challenging.
Thanks, Koen. That sounds like a nice way to wrap up this part of the interview. Let's go back to Q&A. People following online can type in their question, just like in part 1. Anybody in the room that has a question? Yes.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on the pushbacks that you foresee or that you expect, because you have different countries and different agendas maybe also?
Yeah, I need to repeat the question, so I learned from part 1. So the question is, can you elaborate a bit, Koen, on the pushbacks that you encountered?
Yeah, so the pushback that you encountered, for example, is currently, and I think a lot of companies are doing this, your IT services are being cross-charged based on a certain repartition key. That can be sales, that can be users, but as long as the cost is divided, we're happy. Suddenly, you're able to tell to your finance people, Well, I'm able to give you the cost per type of function or application. And suddenly, the responsible of the warehouse management is being reflected with the cost of his warehouse management system in the cloud. And even worse, you're able to allocate the cost. This one is specific for that country, this one is specific for that country, and those two other countries, they no longer need to pay because they don't use this service. So you see that the budget discussions are going to change. Now, keep in mind, I always took the position, FinOps is not about decreasing the cost. Please do not think that you will decrease your costs with FinOps. That's not your goal. Your goal is, or at least mine is, to correctly allocate my costs at the consumer basis, meaning that you take an application, you look who's using it, and then you allocate the cost correctly. But if you're into a culture that everything is into one bucket, you have a nice repartition key, which is in favor or accepted by most of them, and suddenly you're able to show that this country, it's not using the technology as it should be, and is consuming a lot more compared to the other ones, we should cross-charge more to that country. That's one of the pushbacks. Now, if you go into that debate, one advice is immediately propose them the mitigation action. A very easy thing is that if a country causes a peak in the workload, which you then need to scale for, give them immediately the advice, well, we know that your cost is higher. This is due to how you're using the functions and the systems. But if you spread your workload, again, if feasible, you can decrease the cost for you as well. So you come on one side with the bad story, telling them, well, you're going to be cost-charged more. But on the other side, you give them immediately the optimization. You're able to decrease your costs severely as well. So those are the budgets. That's an example of a budget pushback that I received.
So tying into that, question from the online audience. It's actually multiple questions. What do you expect as a return on investment? You pretty much covered that, but then it goes into how long will it take to be break even? And what would you said, I'm not doing it for the reduction, but still there is a reduction part. How do you see that over the coming period/years, the question says?
Good question, and honestly, I didn't really think about that at this point in time. Currently, I'm looking at it as an investment to make sure that we're able to manage this new way of costs compared to what we're doing today. So my driver is really not business case driven, investment driven. So it's a good question. I'll take it along and I'll keep it in the back of my head, and maybe in a future state I'll be able to answer on it.
Fair answer. Another question coming from the online audience. Sam, I will ask you the question. How do you train FinOps expert to become more senior?
How do you train a FinOps expert to become more senior? So this is taking into account that we already have a FinOps expert.
Mm-hmm. Or well, let's take a step back. Yeah. How do you start with the journey?
Well, as a person, you need to understand cloud technology quite well, concepts. You don't need to be a cloud engineer, but you need to understand the cloud concepts and all the payment concepts in a cloud. That should be your second nature as a starting point. Next to that, you should have an interest in finance, right? Otherwise, you don't need to start in a FinOps journey. But to answer the question, so those are basic prerequisites, let's say, for becoming a FinOps practitioner/architect. But how do you become one? Reading, research, and then doing it. Practice makes perfect. So that's the answer I can give here. Yeah.
Maybe elaborate a little bit. There is a certification path that does exist.
Indeed. Okay, so yeah, there is globally there is the FinOps Foundation, which is a community supported by the Linux Foundation. They're driving the story globally and providing those best practices. And it's a very interesting community. I'm glad to be part of it. There's a lot of information coming from there. But you see multiple of these initiatives popping up as well. So keep an open mind, I would say, definitely. But the good thing about the FinOps Foundation is they're very mature in their community, and they offer a certification track. So you can become an associate FinOps practitioner, and recently even a professional FinOps practitioner. So those are things that force you to learn. They also provide courses. So that's definitely a path to follow.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions from the room? Any more questions online? Okay. Well, let's wrap it up. I want to thank, first and foremost, Koen from Ahold Delhaize to really share the journey that he's gone through in a very open, enjoyable atmosphere. I want to thank you, of course, for our daily collaboration as well, but that's another story. Thank you, Sam, and thank you for the audience in the room and both online for attending this first FinOps event. Hope to see you soon with the next version of this in the coming months. Thank you.